Hi, I'm Nick. I live in a dusty attic in a 5-bedroom house with my aunt and her son. I never knew my parents. All I had were Aunt Selma and my cousin Kevin. They weren't the best of people, but they were my people. Aunt Selma's husband left her the moment Kevin was born, and I guess it was tough for her. Maybe it was the reason why she was so angry all the time. Kevin was used to being the only child, and so whatever he says goes in that house. When I came into their lives, Kevin didn't want to share a room with me. Neither did he want me to get any of the other rooms in the house. That's how I ended up living in the attic. I was not allowed out of there when there were visitors. They didn't want anyone to know about me, so I spent a lot of my time reading the one book I had. It was some old survival book about knots. Kevin and I lived in the same house, and yet we led wildly different lives. In the mornings, Aunt Selma would drive my cousin to the most expensive school in town, and I would climb down from my prison to fix up the mess in the kitchen. I'd sweep, dust the whole house, make the beds, and get a load of laundry done all before Aunt Selma was back. Kevin got gifts and toys and everything he wanted. I got to wear his old clothes. In the afternoons, Aunt Selma would knit by the garden as her favorite soap opera played in the background, and she'd watch me tend to the garden. It didn't matter if the sun was beating down my back or if torrential rain poured. I had to be out there, making sure no moles were ruining her prized carrots. There was one thing that kept me going through all that: my dad's memory. There was a pocket watch that he used to own. It was the only thing I had of him. They said it used to belong to my grandpa and his grandpa before him. It was also the only valuable thing I owned. It was made of gold. One day, as I was getting ready for bed, I reached under my pillow where the watch always was and found that it was gone. I searched the entire attic with no luck until the trap door opened up, creaking, and my cousin's head poked through. He had the biggest, most annoying grin in the world. "Looking for this?" I ran towards him and the trap door shut again. I heard him slide down the ladder and running down to the living room where for sure his mom was. I didn't care. That was Dad's watch and he had no right to take it. "Give it back! Give them back to me right now!" "No, can't do. It's mine now." "Just what is happening here? You're supposed to be back in the attic, Nicholas! You're spreading that horrible attic around the house with all this running! Get back up there!" "But he stole my father's watch! It's mine, and I want it back!" "It's not stealing if it's in my house, right, Mother? I'm gonna inherit this house and everything in it, and your watch is in it." "Kevin's right. Now, go up to your room." "All right, and maybe I'll scream until all the neighbors hear me." Aunt Selma's veins on her forehead started to twitch. The one thing she despised was when neighbors started poking around her business. "Give the stupid watch back, Kevin." But Mom!" "Give him back the watch! That's an order!" Kevin slowly walked up to me, his hand outstretched. But before I could take the watch, he threw it on the floor, and his massive feet crashed down on it, breaking the glass into 1,000 pieces. I didn't think. I lunged at Kevin and we wrestled on the floor. Aunt Selma tried to separate us, but my hand was firmly in her son's hair. Kevin started crying and whelping like a sad dog, and Aunt Selma screamed, "Get out! Get out of this house and never come back, or I'm calling the cops!" I didn't know I'd be homeless at 16, but I took what remained of Dad's pocket watch and I never looked back. I worked at a factory so I wouldn't go hungry. The foreman was kind enough to let me sleep in a storeroom that nobody used. That was how I met Sienna. She just came into my room one morning, not expecting to find a boy in there, sleeping. I almost woke up screaming when I saw her staring at me. But she put her hand on my mouth and told me to stay quiet. "I'm hiding from my dad. He wants me to marry some stupid boy, some mayor's son." Sienna and I became friends. I had no idea who her dad was, but she would often come hide out in my storeroom, and we'd talk about the most random things. One day she mentioned that her dad had arranged a date for her and this kid called Kevin. And on that date, the guy said something about an inheritance. An inheritance his mom was sitting on that was supposed to be for his cousin. I asked Sienna what Kevin looked like. Short, stubby. He reminds me of the rubber end of a pencil. And I knew immediately which Kevin she was talking about. So I guess my leaving was what they'd been waiting for this whole time. My dad used to be an important man, and when they told me that all he left were debts, I knew something wasn't right. Sienna and I were planning on how to take back what was mine one night. She had snuck out of her house and came back to the factory, when the doors burst open, and there was Aunt Selma and Kevin, flanked by 2 large men. So, my informants were right. This was where you were hiding. Time to silence you once and for all. I don't know how, but Aunt Selma knew that I knew what they were hiding. The men grabbed me, but then one of them saw Sienna hiding under the table. Isn't that? That's Mr. Cooper's daughter. That is! Grab her! That's 2 birds with 1 stone. Now we can help you get this boy's money, Miss Selma. And we could pressure the girl's father to marry your son. Or maybe we could ask for a ransom. They tied us back to back on a pillar in the attic. I thought they already knew where my inheritance was, but they tore up the whole place and couldn't find anything. I thought it was the end for me. So I confessed something I'd been hiding for a while. Sienna, I think I love you. And I just wanted to tell you in case... Shut up. I love you too. But you can't give up. We're gonna get out of here. She wiggled her hand so that she could hold mine under the ropes, and she squeezed. Oh, no, you're not getting out of here. We're gonna get all the money. We're gonna buy a yacht, and we're gonna leave both of you up here. Kevin's right, so you really should say your goodbyes. Look! A bat! My cousin and aunt started running around like idiots, panicking over something that didn't exist. I kicked at them, and Sienna jumped up and bound them up in the ropes they used to tie us with. When Sienna held my hand, I felt the knots loosen. Whoever tied those ropes had no idea what they were doing. Lucky I had spent most of my life reading up about tying and untying knots. I locked them up in the attic and we ran downstairs. We almost got caught by the 2 guys who were just coming back from buying pizza. But we took the back door and we were out of there. I took Sienna to her dad. I had no idea she was so rich. No idea she was the daughter of the man who owned the place I worked at. He was very nice to me. He hugged me when I brought his daughter back, and he gave me a huge suitcase filled with money as a reward. And when Sienna told her dad she was in love with me, he announced to everyone that I was to become Sienna's fiancé. Her dad was also the leader of the country's biggest underground organization, and he made me his right-hand man. He trained me and introduced me to everyone, and my popularity grew. I was even in a magazine as part of the country's most eligible bachelors. The boss asked me who the people who took his daughter were. He wanted revenge. I wanted to teach them a lesson. I knocked on the door, and I was honestly surprised to learn they still lived there. Aunt Selma crossed her arms and raised her eyebrow at me. I thought she'd be more scared. So, you're back. I bet you have nowhere else to go, huh? You're only getting in if you tell us where your dad hid the key! 2 huge bodyguards pushed through them and pushed them onto the couch. Aunt Selma and Kevin had no idea what was happening. The boss came in too, Sienna just behind them. You live here? My dear friend, Arthur used to live here. Arthur? Arthur Conway? Yes? Why? Arthur Conway was my dad. I knew Arthur well. He would have never left his only son with nothing. And it wouldn't be in a bank. It would be here, in the house he left for you, that these 2 monsters stole. Please, don't hurt us! I noticed Aunt Selma's eyes darting from me to the armchair. I pushed the armchair off and revealed a panel behind it. No, don't! I always wondered why you were always sitting on this armchair, and you never let me clean it or move it. I took the remains of Dad's pocket watch, and from inside, I fished out a small key that Dad had hidden there. I put the key into the lock, and the safe sprung open. Hundreds of diamonds tumbled down onto the floor. I was rich. I was so unbelievably rich. I did show mercy to my aunt and cousin. Instead of letting the mobsters hurt them or capture them, I instead let them work for me. As my servants. They were sworn to do everything I tell them to. Everything. That year, I married Sienna. The whole organization attended, and just as we kissed, the boss announced that I was to be his successor. The doves flew, and they threw confetti and petals at us, and from that moment on, I became the most powerful man in this city.